The little girl stepped out of nowhere, clutching a torn stuffed rabbit and staring at the busy street, like the world had suddenly forgotten her. Cars rushed past in the bright afternoon sunlight. People hurried along the sidewalks, their eyes buried in phones or lost in their own problems. No one noticed the tiny figure standing near the crosswalk, except one man, Ronan Hale. He was a single father who had learned to live quietly with pain. Ronan had just picked up his 6-year-old daughter Mira from school, her small hand wrapped inside his as they walked toward their old pickup truck, parked across the street. The sun hung high in the sky, warming the sidewalks and turning the glass buildings into shining mirrors. Then Ronan saw the girl. She looked about 5 or 6, wearing an oversized yellow sweater and dusty sneakers. Her hair was tangled, and her wide brown eyes searched every passing face like she was hoping someone would recognize her. But no one stopped. Ronan slowed his steps. Something in his chest tightened. It was the same feeling he used to get when Mira was a baby and cried in the middle of the night. The instinct to protect. Before he could think too much about it, Ronan gently guided Mira behind him and walked toward the girl. The child didn't move. She only stared at him. "She's with me," Ronan said calmly when a traffic officer nearby glanced suspiciously toward them. The officer nodded without much interest and turned away. But the truth was, Ronan had absolutely no idea who the girl was. Before the story continues, take a quick moment. If you believe kindness and second chances still exist in this world, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to the channel Deep Night Stories. Your support helps these stories reach hearts around the world. Ronan crouched slowly so he wouldn't scare her. The girl held the stuffed rabbit tighter. Up close, he noticed something that made his stomach sink. Tear stains. Fresh ones. The kind that hadn't stopped long ago. Mira peeked from behind her father's shoulder, her curious eyes studying the stranger. Ronan spoke softly, the same way he used to calm Mira during thunderstorms. He asked if the girl knew where her parents were. The child only shook her head. He asked if she was lost. The girl hesitated, then nodded. Ronan felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. It was a weight he had carried alone, ever since Mira's mother passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden illness. Since that day, Ronan had become everything. Father, mother, protector, problem solver. He worked long hours repairing engines at a small auto shop across town, and every evening he rushed home just in time to help Mira with homework and cook simple dinners. Life wasn't easy, but it was theirs, and now this lost child stood in front of him like a question the world had suddenly asked. Ronan glanced around again. The street was full of people, yet no one seemed to be searching for a missing child. No worried parents, no shouting names, nothing. The girl's fingers trembled slightly as she clutched the rabbit, so Ronan made a decision. He stood up, holding Mira's hand again, and gently gestured for the little girl to follow them. She did, quietly. They walked to the pickup truck, parked under a bright maple tree. The afternoon sun painted warm golden patches across the pavement. Mira climbed into the passenger seat while the girl sat silently in the back, staring out the window as if the city passing by might reveal something familiar. Ronan drove slowly toward the nearest police station. But halfway there, something unexpected happened. Mira turned around in her seat and smiled at the girl. Children have a strange ability to connect without needing explanations. Within minutes, Mira had offered the stranger half of her cookies from lunch. The girl accepted them carefully. Her name, Ronan soon learned, was Nyla. It was the first word she had spoken, and somehow that single word carried a quiet sadness behind it. At the police station, Ronan explained everything. The officers asked Nyla a few questions, but the girl struggled to answer most of them. She didn't seem to know her address. She couldn't clearly explain where she had come from. What worried Ronan most was the look in her eyes whenever someone mentioned home. Fear. The officers said they would contact nearby schools and check missing child reports. Until they figured things out, Nyla would be placed in temporary care through social services. Ronan nodded politely. But as Nyla was gently led toward another room, the girl suddenly turned back. Her eyes locked onto Ronan, and she looked terrified. Not the kind of fear a child shows in front of strangers. It was deeper, like the fear of being abandoned again. Ronan felt something twist inside his chest. He remembered the first night Mira slept without her mother in the house, the way she had cried until exhaustion took over. Some wounds never truly leave, they just become quieter. Ronan hesitated. Then he asked the officer a simple question. What if he could take care of Nyla, just for tonight? The officer looked surprised. Temporary guardianship was possible under certain conditions, especially since Ronan had been the one who found her. Paperwork would need to be signed, and the situation would still be investigated, but it could work. An hour later, Nyla was sitting in the back seat of Ronan's truck again. This time, she looked slightly less afraid. The drive home felt strangely peaceful. The sky was clear blue, and warm daylight poured across the city streets, as if nothing unusual had happened. Yet Ronan couldn't stop thinking about the moment he had said those words earlier. She's with me. At the time, it had been instinct. Now it felt like something more. Ronan's small house sat at the end of a quiet street lined with trees and white fences. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and lived in. Mira immediately rushed inside to show Nyla her room. Within minutes, toys were scattered across the floor and laughter filled the house. Ronan stood in the kitchen doorway watching them. For the first time in a long while, the house sounded fuller. That evening, he cooked a simple dinner. Pasta and soup. Nothing special. But Nyla ate like someone who hadn't had a warm meal in days. After dinner, Mira showed her favorite storybooks, and the two girls eventually fell asleep, side by side on the couch under a soft blanket. The setting sun painted orange light through the windows. Ronan sat quietly in a chair nearby. Something about Nyla's presence stirred questions he couldn't ignore. Where had she come from? Why was she alone? And why had she looked so afraid when the police mentioned home? The next morning brought answers Ronan never expected. Social services called early. They had found something. Nyla had been reported missing 2 days earlier from a neighboring town. But the story behind it was far darker than anyone imagined. Her father had been arrested for severe neglect. Neighbors had called authorities after hearing constant shouting and seeing Nyla wandering outside alone late at night. When investigators arrived, the house was empty. Nyla had disappeared until Ronan found her standing near that crosswalk. The woman on the phone explained gently that Nyla would likely enter foster care once the legal process began. Ronan thanked her and ended the call. He looked across the room. Nyla and Mira were sitting on the floor, building a crooked tower of blocks. Both girls laughed when it collapsed. Something about that simple moment hit Ronan deeply. He had spent years rebuilding life piece by piece after losing his wife. He knew what it meant to feel alone, and suddenly the idea of Nyla being sent from house to house with strangers felt unbearable. Days passed as the investigation continued. Nyla stayed temporarily with Ronan under supervision. Each day, she grew more comfortable. She smiled more, she talked more, and slowly, the quiet sadness in her eyes began to fade. One afternoon, while they were drawing pictures at the kitchen table, Nyla looked up at Ronan and asked a question so small it almost broke him. If she could stay there, just a little longer. Ronan didn't answer right away, but something inside him already knew. Weeks later, after court hearings and background checks, the final decision arrived. Nyla would not return to her father. Instead, she would be placed with a foster family approved by the system. But the social worker also had another option to consider. Ronan Hale. Single father, stable home. Strong recommendation from the officers who had first handled the case. Ronan signed the papers with trembling hands. The day Nyla officially joined their family, the afternoon sun filled the small living room with warm golden light. Mira hugged her so tightly they both nearly fell over. Nyla laughed. A real laugh. A real laugh. The kind that echoes through a home and changes it forever. Ronan stood there quietly, realizing something powerful. The day he had said, "She's with me," he thought he was helping a lost child. He didn't know that the universe had quietly placed another daughter into his life. Sometimes the people we think we are saving are the ones who end up saving us. And if this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to Deep Night Stories so more people can hear stories like this. Before we finish, here's a small request for you. Write, "Kindness still exists," in the comments if you believe one simple act can change your life forever. Because somewhere out there today, a small moment of compassion might be waiting to rewrite someone's entire story. And on a bright afternoon in a busy city, one quiet sentence did exactly that.